friends and neighbors. We think today we are going to be talking about what actually a title company does and what they're about. We all have questions about who is title and why we need a title company. So today I have a friend and a colleague in the title industry. Barron is the owner of Sterling Title and has been for, we won't say how many years, but but enough to have that education and knowledge to be able to help us today during our show. Barron, you want to welcome? And
Yes.
would you like to tell me a little bit about what's about you and your company and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's always great to be able to educate people on what we do, because a lot of times we get the question, what is title insurance? Why do I need it? Who's involved in it? What does it cover? And so forth. And a lot of people, quite honestly, just don't know what it is or why they really have to have it. So, but a little background on myself. I've been in the title insurance business for over 25 years. Have dealt with a lot of different types of transactions, and once again, just super excited to be able to pass my knowledge on and hopefully educate some people today on what title insurance is and why you need it.
Yeah, it's one of the most important parts of a real estate transaction. Of course, we have a good team of people that we work together. We're all in partnership with this. You do, as a purchaser or a seller, have the choice to pick which title company you want to have represent you in your transaction. But I wanted to bring Barron in today because he really has that experience. He has that knowledge. There's a lot of hiccups that can go on in a real estate transaction, and usually we find the title company will find them for us. So why would I need title insurance? What is title insurance?
So it's a great question. The bottom line with title insurance is that title insurance is going to protect you as a seller and is going to protect you as a buyer. There's a lot of what we consider to be hidden hazards when selling a property or buying a property that the title insurance company is going to check out. And they could be simple things from a forged document, a typographical error in a document, a wrong legal description, liens that were recorded on a property that have not been released, and we could go on, but those are all types of things that the title insurance company is going to check on to make sure that these items have been taken care of. So when you purchase that home or you sell that home, that you know you're transferring clear title.
Correct. So that's sometimes why we have two title insurances. You can have a buyer's title insurance and a seller's insurance because you have to have it on both sides of your transaction. So how do I find a title company? Like I said, there's a lot of us out there, and you as well. How do you find that title company?
So the title insurance industry, kind of how it works is your realtor or your mortgage representative that you're working with typically has a relationship, like we do, with working with a certain title company or a title provider. Of course, as you mentioned earlier, you can always choose who you want for your title insurance company, whether you be on the buyer side or on the seller side. But normally on our side, it's one of those situations where, as you mentioned, Joan, it boils down to certain things and people that you trust and you can count on to get the job done and get the job done the right way. So ultimately, we'd of course love to work with any buyers or any sellers, but at the end of the day, of course, that buyer or seller can always choose whoever they wanted to for their title insurance policies.
Sure. And it's written into our purchase agreements and also our exclusive right to sell agreements, which title company we will be using, and I let my clients know which title company that is. So if there's any information or resources they're interested in finding out about that title company, I know your company definitely will pick up the phone every time they call and answer any questions they may have.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
What services does a title company, you mentioned some of the things, you dig deeper into the actual property and what's attached to that property. Let's say you need to know if you might not even know there's a lien on your property. These are things you come up with. What other types of things does a title company will look into?
So there's basically two major parts of the title insurance company. So first off, we do what we call escrow, and then of course title insurance. So what I mean by escrow, for instance, You have a buyer that's going to put down a earnest money deposit when purchasing a property, which is pretty common to do. Sometimes the title insurance company will hold that earnest money deposit. Those funds get held in what we call a non-interest-bearing checking account. And then, of course, those funds will be applied to the transaction when the deal actually came to the closing table. Some of the other escrow things that we hold could be water escrows, use and occupancy escrows, or possession escrows. Could be security deposit escrows, things of that nature that would be part of the actual purchase agreement. And then the second half of that is going to be the title insurance. So as you mentioned, depending on the type of transaction that we're doing, we're going to do, when someone's purchasing a property, we're going to do a 40-year search on that property. So we're going to go back 40 years to check the chain of title to make sure, of course, that everyone who's had interest in that property over those years have deeded themselves out of the property. We're also going to check, again, things such as legal descriptions, could be old mortgages from previous owners that could possibly pop up where the lender did not discharge that mortgage when they got paid off years back. There's a lot of different things that we do on that side that go a lot deeper than a lot of people realize. And ultimately, the end goal is to take care of any type of issues that would be going on with that property to get that closing to the table and get the buyers in their new home.
Yay. Well, that's great. So I know that there's a cost to insurance like there is on anything.
Right.
And I know that what's really great about title insurance is that there's a specific rate that is attached to the dollar amount of that sale. How do we get to those rates? Where do those rates come from? Who comes up with the rates?
So that's actually another great question. So the title insurance rates are actually regulated by the Insurance Bureau in the state of Michigan. So every state works a little bit differently, but here in Michigan, it's all going to depend on the sales price of the property, as for what we call the owner's policy. And then if you're taking out a loan to purchase a home, you're going to get what's called a loan policy. That rate is also going to be calculated based upon what size loan you're taking. So like anything, the higher the loan amount, the higher the sales price, the more cost you're going to pay for the title insurance. Ultimately, those are going to vary. Basically how they're calculated, Joan, is they are per thousand. So they go up a little bit per thousand. As they get higher, the dollar amount changes a little bit on what they charge per thousand. But of course, you could always jump online and pull up the rate charts here in Michigan, and they're going to be the same across the board for all title insurance companies here in Michigan.
That's a great thing to pay attention to, especially when we get further down into the show and we talk about what a settlement statement is and what to look for on that. So, so the rates are set by the state so we know that they're a set rate. And how often do those change? Is it annually, or how often?
You know, it really varies. I would say our last rate bump was back in 2020. So usually I would say every 4 to 5 years is kind of the norm that I've seen since I've been in the industry.
Sure. All right. Well, that's great. Well, we hope this was very informational to you. We're going to move on into the next segment about what actually you need to get before you get to that closing table, and how the title insurance company is there to help you with us every step of the way. Well, great. I'm glad we're still here talking about title insurance. So, Barron, what happens before we get to the closing table? So, of course, we know the closing table is when we're going to all meet together, and it may be the first time that the buyers or sellers are actually going to see the title company that's been doing all this work for them as we walk through the process. I, as an agent, always believe in what we call a pre-title order. So as an agent, once we get the sale, we contact our title company that we're working with. We share either our exclusive right, our seller's agreements, and also any documents that the title company requires. This is one and only time during this process that we will be needing and using your Social Security number. The title company has to have your Social Security number. They'll need a copy of your license. And also the purchase agreement. They're going to want to see what is included in the purchase agreement. Remember, this is a legal contract. So everything that's written in those contracts are legal and binding. So that is one thing that the title company has to have that we give to them before we order title. What other things I know I've missed a lot because you guys are pros and I just kind of give you all the stuff you need. Hopefully I give you the stuff I need. Right. Otherwise we're talking, right? Our teams are talking. So what do we need for pre-order?
So basically, one of the examples would be that we come across often are properties that are held in a trust. So a lot of times we'll pull the title on the property and find out that the owners have a trust and the title, the fee simple title is being held in the name of the trust. So in those types of cases, we would need to get information in regards to their trust. Usually in their trust binder that they're given from their trust attorney. They're going to have powers pages in there. They're going to have their cover page, which will list the name of the trust, which typically will have a date and year that it was that trust was put together. Mm-hmm. And then out of there, we're going to determine who has the right to sign on behalf of that trust. So as long as the trustees of the property are still alive and well, then we would, of course, have them execute documents. But that trust really is what pretty much lets us know what has to be done and who can do the signing on behalf of the trust. That's one of the big ones. I would say probably 50% of the properties that we deal with seem to be in a trust, which is good. You know, helps protect people, and if something was to happen to someone, obviously the trust would work, in line with the folks that own the property to be able to do what needed to be done. So, but another big one could be a divorce. You know, If someone went through a divorce, we're going to need to see a copy of that divorce decree. We want to make sure we know, who was awarded that property in the divorce. Mm-hmm. And for instance, if that person was awarded the property, there could be additional funds that were supposed to give to the ex-spouse of that property. Mm-hmm. So that's always a popular one as well. And there could be a bankruptcy. There could potentially be federal or state tax liens, things of those of that nature, which is another reason why Social Security numbers are important, especially with common names. Sure. If you have the last name Jones or Smith, when we're pulling up a property, more than likely we're going to find a federal or state tax lien against that name. In order to confirm that it doesn't belong to our seller, we need to verify that Social Security number to make sure that it doesn't match.
So it's an amazing feat what your team of folks do in the office to pull all and gather all this information to make sure that you're ensuring that that title is clear and that we're good to sell it. And all the people who may own it. I know we worked on a deal many years ago where it was actually the third wife's name that was still on the title, and then we're like, no one knew how or where to find this person. The seller didn't know, and we're like, okay, because her name was actually on the warranty deed that she had to be able to sign off on, and I think she got part of the outcome of that deal. But it is amazing. It's crazy how many things can get attached to a property that you're unaware of or you're not thinking about. So as you're thinking about listing, or especially on the listing side, to clear that title, make sure you're thinking about those things. Are you in touch with who the trustees are? Did any of the trustees die? I know that they're going to need a copy of that. Yes. They are big. Usually 3 So those are things you want to make sure you have in order for sure. I'm working currently with a power of attorney. So I Right, but the mother is still alive. So the mother is still signing, but she, as a power of attorney, is involved in this deal as well. So we'll take care of that. So, so some of those documents, they're not handy. I know you can gather them from ways that I don't know how you get them.
Miracles.
Miracles. Okay, we like miracles,
right.
The good ones.
The good ones.
Yeah. So a big part of what's going to happen that you're putting together for us on the title side is what's called a settlement statement. What actually is a settlement statement, and why is it an important document?
So a settlement statement ultimately is going to break down all the numbers on your transaction. So whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller, we'll start with the seller side. It's going to break down, of course, the sales price of the property, any commission amounts that are being paid to the real estate agents involved. There's going to be tax prorations on there. There could potentially be what we call homeowners association prorations, sewer or waste prorations, and then whenever selling a property in Michigan, you're going to pay transfer tax, so those figures are going to be on there, along with any other things that could possibly be owing on the property. Could be special assessments, multiple different things, but most importantly is to go through all those numbers prior to the closing, make sure you understand all the figures, and of course if there's any questions that you have prior to the closing, we're always happy to answer any questions, and I know you are as well too, just to make sure that everybody is comfortable and understands where everything is being dispersed to.
Correct.
Buyer side, same thing. So buyer side settlement statement is going to break down the same information. Typically on the buyer side, there's going to be more figures on that side, especially if the buyer is taking out a mortgage on the property to purchase the property. And of course, it's going to list all of the mortgage closing costs, any title fees, recording fees, once again, those prorations as well. Typically, the buyers are going to go through that final figure with their lender, but it, of course, doesn't hurt to have two sets of eyes and everything just to make sure that that everything is where it's supposed to be, and that once again the buyer would be comfortable with the numbers that that they're looking at the closing table.
Sure. And sometimes, just to be clear, a net sellout sheet that we have created at the beginning to let you know what some of these costs may vary. Remember, those are estimates. The settlement statement is in the actual, and this is after combining all of those fees together on that transaction. The other question will be: are you going to be at the closing? Will someone from the title company actually be at this closing table?
Yes. Someone will be at the closing table for sure. We actually the closing table, in my opinion, is actually the best part of the whole transaction. You know, it's always exciting being involved with the sale of a property or the purchase of a property, and honestly, getting to meet the buyers and the sellers, and typically the buyers and sellers getting to meet each other, talking about the home and maybe different memories they made in the property, and so on and so forth. So it's always the most exciting time, and of course, we're going to show up there with a lot of paperwork, a lot of pens. And start signing some documentation. So. For sure. And at the closing, if you ever have any questions, this is your time. You make sure you ask any question whatsoever as it relates to these documents that you're signing. It's your time to ask the questions, and you have the professional in front of you. The title company will know that. So during our next session, we will be discussing about what happens after the closing and what happens with all those documents that we just signed. All right, so now we just ended up with
what you need to get to the closing table. And you do, just to go back to that though, when do you get your settlement statement? Because you need to be able to review that before you go to the closing table to make any changes. When would I expect to get that statement?
So typically what's going to happen is the closing statement, once we have all the final figures together, which actually we cannot put together until we have an actual closing date, because of course everything is based on the closing date. Prorations change and so forth on a daily basis. So as soon as we have that closing date and we have all of our information together, I would say typically within 72 hours of the closing, we try to get that closing statement out to you. Okay. Unless we'd be waiting on something like a payoff or an HOA letter or something of that nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because I know from my side, everyone always wants to know, how much do I have to write my check for? How do I get the check? When do I get the check? Who's going to give me the check? Everyone wants to know, where's the check?
Right.
The check is with the title company. They are the backbone to this whole transaction. They are going to make sure that that settlement statement is right. As soon as I know I see it, I review it very quickly, review it with the clients, and make sure if there's anything off that we call you right away to say, hey, this was our end, we forgot. Hey, we didn't put this in there, but I know your team of folks have always called us if something isn't there.
Right.
So
doesn't look right.
Yeah, or it doesn't, what it was. So once again, I know we have a lot of eyes looking at those documents. So we're all signed. Everything is all signed, and you happen to have a couple forms in your packet that are going to potentially go to either the buyer or the seller or both. And those normally are escrow forms. So can you tell me a little bit about, and this does become an issue, so please pay very close attention to this. I'm going to talk about escrow and the water bill first. And who does the final water bill, who's holding the money, who distributes the money?
Gotcha. That's a great question too. We actually hold a lot of water escrows for years, waiting for people to reach out to us to allow us to release those funds. But ultimately, what's going to happen? There's two different ways that this can go down. So normally, what would happen is at the closing, your closer, who's handling the actual closing, is going to remind the seller and the buyer that we have to generate a final water bill, as long as the property is not on well or septic. Sure. Of course, on well and septic, don't need to worry about it. City water, city sewer, will have to get that bill generated. One thing to always keep in mind as well is that if the seller of the property is, say, closing today, and the buyer's not going to take possession of that property until, we'll say, 60 days from now, and the seller's going to live there and keep occupancy, obviously they're not going to want to order that final water bill until they've actually handed those keys over. And when it comes to ordering the final water bill, I've seen it work a couple different ways, depending on the situation with the seller. If the seller and buyer are close by, sometimes they will go ahead and handle that on their own when they're flipping the keys over to the new buyers. I see in some cases the agents will order that final water bill for them. And then, of course, in some cases, there's certain municipalities here around the area that actually don't generate a final water bill. So what we'll do in those is typically it'll be a quarterly water bill. So when the keys are handed over, the next bill that comes in, which of course would be to the new buyer, we would prorate that bill based upon the date that the keys were exchanged. But it's very important to remember that those funds that we're holding, we're waiting to get that information from either the realtor or the buyer or the seller. And most of the municipalities, at least in Oakland and Macomb County, these days are all electronically read meters. Yeah. So you literally just have to call the water department, let them know what the scoop is. You need a final read as of today, sure, and they'll generate it. And then usually they'll send it to wherever you want them to send it to. So you can, of course, always have it sent to your realtor, or you can have it sent directly to the title company. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pay that final water bill out of any escrow funds that we were holding from the seller. And then obviously we'll refund any overage of those funds that we had back to the seller. And typically, and I can't remember, Joan, what your purchase agreements show, but I'm going to guess typically it's around a $300
sure,
water escrow
sure.
is kind of the norm.
I think it's a very, it's the average, $300 yeah. In most cases. It might be a little bit more if you're giving a lot longer right, occupancy, right, but really within a 30 to 60 day occupancy, that would mostly cover it unless you had
Hopefully.
sprinklers going forever, all night long, 24 hours a day, but anywho. Yeah, so that's really important. Make sure that you ask and answer, have all your questions answered at the closing table about a water escrow. The next one is occupancy escrow, and I know that it's very similar to what we just talked about with the water, but everyone's saying, are they moving out? When are they moving out? How are we moving out? When do I get my check? How do I get my check? That sort of stuff. So once again, it's pretty similar to water, but that's a big question that I know a lot of sellers and buyers have after the close table.
Right, and that is very true. You know, a lot of times, depending on the transaction, of course they all vary depending on the deal, but in some cases we are holding occupancy money, and as an example, if we close today and I'm selling my property to you, but I'm going to stay in there for 30 days, I could potentially be paying you rent on a per day basis. So ultimately, same thing would apply, is everyone would receive a document at the closing table, which we call a key exchange form. What that key exchange form is for is once the keys are actually surrendered over, both parties would sign off on that, agreeing to the date that the keys were surrendered, and then that form would be sent to the title company, and then we would go ahead and disperse any of those occupancy escrow funds out according to that document. So if they stayed the full 30 days, obviously all that possession escrow would go directly to you, or if we got out midway, obviously we'd split those funds. And that daily rate is always going to vary depending on the transaction type.
Yeah. So for me, I find it to be very important to make sure that you're actually writing those date downs, put it in your phone, put it wherever you do, because you want to make sure when you're getting closer to that we're in touch with, as a realtor, that I stay a part of that transaction until those keys are actually fully exchanged. I will make sure that those documents get to the title company, so you, the buyer, will definitely receive any escrow that was held on that transaction. So it's a really important piece to remember. I know I have it on my calendars as to when those dates are, so just make sure you don't forget them. You know, we get all emotional and excited about that new house that we get, and we want to make sure that we're still fulfilling all those requirements that we've agreed to in our contracts. The other, one of the more important, and I would say one of the most important documents to do, and I always recommend it to do the day of the closing if at all possible, is that property transfer affidavit. So what's the property transfer affidavit, Barron?
So there's the property transfer affidavit. There's going to be a total of 2 forms depending on if you're going to be purchasing this new home as your primary residence. So the property transfer affidavit is going to be given to the new purchaser at the closing. They're going to have 45 days from the date of closing to file that form with the local assessor's office. If you're familiar with the area, you know where to go. Obviously at the closing, we'll give you an address, let you know the hours that the assessor is open, so you can run this form over there. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to let the assessor know that you're the new owner of the property, and they're going to transfer the tax bills into your name. There are penalties beyond 45 days, so as you mentioned, moving, changing residence, a lot of things going on, packing, all this fun stuff. It easily can be forgotten, but it's very, very important to get that form filed. And if you are going to be occupying that property as your primary residence, you're also going to receive a form which is called a homestead exemption affidavit. This form would be filed tandem with the property transfer affidavit. And the important thing about the homestead exemption affidavit is it allows you to claim the property as your primary residence, so you're paying what we call the homesteaded tax rate as opposed to the non-homesteaded tax rate.
Sure. So those are both very important forms. I know we say, oh, I'm excited, I'm going to go give someone a tax bill, basically, to tell me how much I'm going to start paying.
Let them know who to send
You make sure you get that statement over there. Right. But it truly is very important for you, the purchaser, to make sure that property is in your name with the certified through the assessor's office at your local municipality. Well, Barron, thank you so much. The information that you shared with us today has been very valuable to anyone that's in this process of buying or selling a home. You are the backbone to this process. We do depend on you and your company to do such great work that you've done for years for many people. I thank you for that, and I thank you for being with us today. I think this could definitely be a two showing, because there's so much information that the title company really does provide. As always, we're grateful for you for watching our show today and being with us today. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me or Barron with any questions that you may have as it relates to title or any real estate transaction. As always, I wish you the best. Enjoy life today. Make it the best. And we'll see you next time when we talk about seniors in our community.